Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about child adoption in Nigeria. Adoption in Nigeria. We live in a world where inability to have children in marriage is almost considered a curse, especially in Africa. And the odds are always against the women. Now, because of the stigma that comes with childlessness and public opinion that comes with inability to have children, a lot of people have succumbed to pressure and they've followed the illegal way to acquire children. If you've been following me for a while, you know I talk about baby factories a lot and their illegal activities where they groom pregnant women, especially young girls, young pregnant girls. They keep them in a house, they nurture them all through the period of the pregnancy, and then they give them a fee, a little token, take the children from them and sell the children off to other people. Today, we want to open your eyes to adoption and the need for you to prove to you that there's absolutely no need to go the illegal way. We're going to talk about adoption, the procedure, the realities, and everything you can imagine when it comes to adoption. So you can drop your comments you can drop your questions in the comment section. I have with me two strong women, although I've not been able to add one yet, but we're supposed to have two guest speakers. One is here already. Her name is Jessica Andrew Jaja. Jessica is a lawyer, a public speaker, a family and property law expert. She's also a legal research enthusiast, and she has ample experience when it comes to adoption. So she's going to be breaking down adoption for us today. We're supposed to have with us Marian Odu Esquire, who is also a lawyer, a property consultant, climate change activist, and a child rights expert. I really sincerely hope that she's able to join this video. She's able to join us. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedule to join us. We really appreciate. Thank you very much. Let me just try one more time to add Marian before we start. Okay. Funny enough, I can't even find her on the list of viewers, and I can't find a request from her, so I don't know what to do. Okay, while we wait for her to keep trying, let's start the conversation. Jessica, let's start with the issue of infertility and how much it drives people to consider adoption as a way of having children, and how acceptable is adoption considering our cultures and our beliefs in Africa and Nigeria. Let's start with the issue of infertility and how acceptable adoption is as an option for having children.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. The struggle to log in was very serious.
I know, right?
But we're having an informal talk here because adoption is something that is close to people's hearts. And today we are saying, okay, we are not going to put it to people. We are not going to speak as we would speak if you were in a law office. We are going to speak because we want people to understand the bedrock and the background of what we are saying. Now, people don't just wake up and say they want to adopt a child. There are some very crucial issues that necessitate adoption. Once a family is created by virtue of marriage, which is the natural way, we say, okay, the family wants to start up, even though there are other circumstances that may arise where an individual may decide to have a child. But in the general sense, it's a family that necessitates a child. And we say, okay, a man and a wife decide to have children of their own. This is done through natural birth. When they conceive a child and the child is born, that's natural birth. But we find out that in society today, a lot of men and women have been unable to conceive. The issue of infertility is a very serious one, and it is not only a problem for the woman, it is also a problem for men these days. There are several reasons and causes of infertility. but we are not going to go into that because we are not medical practitioners.
Of
But I
course.
want to say that, okay, infertility is one of the reasons people adopt children. There are many ways to have a child. You can have a child through natural birth, through adoption, surrogacy, where another person carries the child in their womb, even though maybe the egg and the sperm was donated by the people who want the child. Then there's also the option of artificial reproductive technology, where people use IVF and ZIFT and all those medical things they do with the use of technology, and they manipulate eggs and sperm, and then a child is being a child is formed. Now, biology and science goes together for artificial reproductive technology. But what we are here to discuss is what is common and accepted in society, because I
Okay.
know in most faiths, the use of science and technology to have a child
It's
is
not
not
acceptable.
accepted yet. Yes, it's
Yeah.
not accepted yet by some extremists. But adoption seems to be the option that is open to even even Buddhists, the Islam, the Christians, the Muslims, everybody seems to be okay with, okay, if you can't have a child by natural birth, you can take a child that is in need of a family. That is what adoption does. So
And raise
different
them as
reasons,
yours.
yes, raise them as yours. Different reasons make people desire a child. It could be to replace a dead child. It could be to have a companion for your only child. Adoption could be the reason to stabilize your marriage. It could be maybe to legitimize an illegitimate child. I know many people don't understand that, but in law, you want to legitimize an illegitimate child, it can go by adoption. And then to sustain a particular line of descent, maybe your progeny, which obviously is an issue, and then your descendants. Maybe you want to have 10 sons and you have 8, you decide to adopt 2 to complete them. People do different things for different reasons. Many people simply adopt just to give a home and family to children who do
Yes.
not have one. So these are the reasons. WHO says, okay, sexual intercourse more than 12 months without the ability to show a fruitful result is infertility. But we also know that there are people who are not infertile, who decide to have children outside natural birth. So
Okay.
these are the issues that necessitate this adoption we keep hearing all the time in society. Even though many of these legal words and legal languages have been over time manipulated and misinterpreted. But this adoption, I think, if you mention adoption on the streets, 1 or 2 persons will have something to say, even if they are
You
not
have an
lawyers.
idea.
So it's
Yeah.
a common language. Yes, it's a common language, but there are many misconceptions concerning adoption. So, as an introduction, I think that's what necessitates adoption.
Okay. Marian, I can't even find you on the viewers list, so I can't even invite you to join the videos. I don't know what is going on, but I'll keep trying. I'll keep trying. Okay, Jessica. So going forward, just give us an outline of the procedure, the way it is on paper, the way people can read it, and just the steps to legal
Okay,
adoption. What are the
okay.
steps?
Adoption is not complex. It's not complex, but it's not a simple process. When you say,
Okay.
okay, give an outline of the process for adoption, even if I sit here and give an outline, the layman may not understand what I would say. So I would
True.
just say, if you are in need of adoption, I advise that you go through the legal means and you do so with the help of a professional. But I can summarize what it would take for someone who wants to have an adopted child. The first thing is
Okay.
to admit to yourself that you want a child,
Mm-hmm.
because adoption has a lot to do with the mindset. Some people just wake up after crying and saying, oh God, give me, and then it's not forthcoming. They just say, okay, let me go and get one, without first satisfying their mind that they can actually handle what comes with adoption. So before you even take that step of saying, okay, I want to adopt a child, you must first agree with yourself and your spouse, if you have one, that adoption is necessary. It's not in all cases of infertility that adoption is necessary. And adoption is actually not for everybody, because not two
Okay.
families are the same. There are some families, if you adopt a child, you've even worsened the situation than if you were even childless in the marriage. So you need to weigh the circumstances before you bring in somebody who is a stranger and you give the person the rights and privileges of being your child. So the legal framework in Rivers State, prior to this time, we used to have an adoption law, 1999. But as of today that we speak, I practice in Rivers State, so I can speak for Rivers State very well. We have now...
But the law should be similar in
Yes,
every other state at least.
of course, the Child's Right Law of the Child's Right Act of 2003 covers
Okay.
adoption in
In
Abuja,
Nigeria.
where the law, yes, where the law functions. But it is expected that all states should have state laws that regulate their own issues. So the law, similar to the Child's Right Act of 2003, which is the federal law, is our own River State Child's Rights Law of 2022. We used to have one of 2009, but it has been updated, and there are a lot of new measures in our new law. So the law is now of 2022, and Chapter 12 provides for adoption. So first things first, if you say, okay, I want to adopt a child, you must have some documents. You cannot not have, let me say, you cannot not have, you must have.
We understand.
Yes, you must have. It's not an issue of optionable. It's not optional. You must have certain documents. So the woman in the village who doesn't even have her birth certificate and who just says, oh, I want to adopt a child, it would be difficult for you, because adoption is a legal process, and for you to pursue any legal process, it is a matter of documentation. So for you to adopt a child in Rivers State, it is a matter of documentation, because it is a court process. It is the court that gives the adoption order. It is not like we watch in Nollywood movies and you say adoption papers. I don't know what people call adoption papers. Even divorce papers, sign the divorce papers. You hear some
It's not like
colloquial
that in
terms.
reality.
It's not like that in reality. It's an order of court. The same way you want to dissolve a marriage, you say the divorce papers. Dissolution of marriage is an order of court. So even adoption too is an order of court that you must receive as judgment that this child now legally belongs to you. So if you want to adopt a child, the first thing that should come to your mind is that it is regulated by a ministry. The ministry in Lagos could be the Ministry of Social Welfare and Rehabilitation. In Rivers State is the Ministry of Social Welfare and Rehabilitation. The commissioner there is Honorable Inime Aguma. Now, if you want to adopt a child, there's a social welfare department. There's a social welfare department. It is that department that handles adoption. You go there, or your lawyer goes there, and you brief a lawyer, you want to adopt a child. The lawyer knows what to do, actually. You don't need to tell the lawyer what to do. What is important is that you, as the person adopting, has the child. Lawyers don't look for children for people. And don't go buying children, because it's an offense.
Okay, before you continue, so someone has to find the child first.
Yes.
So you can go to an orphanage first and say, okay, you like this child and you want to adopt this child.
You can even see the ones on the streets that you feel you want to adopt, though we'll still talk about that. People pick up children from streets and claim they've adopted them. That's illegal. You cannot adopt a child because the parents are late. An orphan is not a license to adopt a child because the child is an orphan. There are criteria for adoption. The court must be satisfied of certain things before a child is adopted. If I lose my parents now, doesn't mean that I'm ripe for adoption. There are children who lose their parents at an early age, because when you adopt a person, you extinguish the rights and privileges and relationship with the biological parents. So if a child loses mother and father, and you adopt that child, you have automatically severed that child from their biological parents, whether late or alive. So
including
a child
their rights to the biological parents' properties,
inheritance. Yes. So adoption of a child whose parent is late is not the solution. When you get advice from a legal practitioner, you would know that, okay, the step to take in such instance is guardianship, not adoption. You can be a guardian of the surviving parent, and if there is no surviving parent, a relative of the parents can apply to the court that I want to be the guardian of this child in the absence of the parents. And even people who are alive can, by a deed or a will, state that this is the person to be the legal guardian of my children if anything happens to me. Like today, now, let me use myself for example. If anything happens to me, I can, in a will or in a deed, say, okay, my child or my children will be taken care of by my younger sister, by my mother, by my mother-in-law, by my father, somebody that is close to me, but it has to be expressly stated. In the absence of that, it is now the responsibility of the courts to appoint a guardian for that child.
Okay.
That does not amount to adoption.
Okay,
so
but
if you want to adopt, let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
If you want to adopt a child, you go to the ministry when you have the child, because even the law says you must have stayed at least 3 months with that child. So it is assumed that you already
adoption.
Yes, before the process, because they will come to
understand
inspect
something. Let's understand something. So you find a child, even if the child is in an orphanage, will they release the child to you so you can stay with this child for 3 months before you commence the process?
If the child is in an orphanage, it means the child is under the care. For an orphanage is like a foster home. There's legal fostering under the law. An orphanage is like a foster home. So the foster parents have rights over that child, and fostering gives you a lot of rights, because it suspends the rights of birth parents too. But the difference is, in fostering suspends the rights of birth parents, but adoption extinguishes the rights of birth parents. That's the difference under law. So you can be
so briefly, can you just differentiate between adoption, guardianship, and fostering, so that we can understand what we're doing going forward?
Okay, adoption is taking another person's child into your family to become the child's legal parents. The implication of adoption is that such a child becomes part of the family, which may not be the one he or she is born into. Adoption now gives rise to a parent-child relationship, which is legally concluded upon the procurement of a judicial order of a court of competent jurisdiction. Do you see how it's like a tight situation? Because this is serious business. But in the situation of fostering is a provision of the state that, okay, one person or a man and a wife, or a home or an institution can take children, and these children have to be a class of people that you can take as foster children. Orphans whom their relatives have abandoned, a child who has been neglected and abused, and then you take this child and you take care of the child, maintain the child, and educate the child, and all that and all that and all that. And the state even has a foster care system. These children who roam about the streets, if all things are equal, all things being equal, we shouldn't have children roaming around on the streets. Every state should have a foster care system. We watch movies and we see how children in the US are moved from foster home to foster home. And those situations where foster parents are even paid by the state to take these children.
Take care of the children.
Even though sometimes the children are maltreated and just because the parents benefit and get money from the state. But it's a system that works. And it's so it should be, because our laws provide for these things. But it's not that way in Nigeria. In fact, once you are above a certain age, no orphanage wants to even house you. So orphanages in Nigeria seem to be homes for infants, very little children. Yes, once you're above a certain age, you can talk. Before you know it, they just find someone. Yes, there's no space for you, and most of them end up in the streets and in homes that are not. They're not even legally adopted. They're just taken away, become house help. A lot of things really happen. But if you want to, guardianship, I had stated earlier about guardianship. Guardianship is is actually most times guardianship arises from the parents. As a parent,
Okay.
you are entitled to be the guardian of your child. Now, if guardianship arises when you apply to courts, because guardianship, everybody who is a parent is automatically a guardian of the child.
Okay.
Now, for you to be a guardian without being a parent, I don't know if you're understanding
I'm
me. We have talked
following
about
you.
fostering. Fostering is okay, you're just taking care of this child,
A
maintaining
temporary
this child.
arrangement.
Because of the circumstances surrounding this child. But guardianship, it's like a legal it's a legal process that gives rise to guardianship. But most times it's also in a parental relationship. So
Okay.
a surviving parent can apply to be the guardian of a child. The absence of a
Okay.
surviving parent, a relative can apply to be the guardian of a child. And the guardian of a child is entitled to manage and take over the estate of that child if that child is deceased. That's to inherit the properties of that child in the event that that child dies. So,
Okay.
legal guardianship and adoption, the rights somehow intertwine because every parent is also
It's
a guardian.
already a
But
guardian.
not every guardian is a parent. There's a line. There's a line that you
Okay.
cannot cross. Yes. If you're not a parent, you're not a parent. It's either you're an adoptive parent or you're a biological parent. Any other thing outside that, you're a guardian.
Okay. So
Whether
I
you are
needed us to.
appointed by will, whether you're appointed by a will or a deed, or you're court appointed, you are a guardian. You're not a parent.
Okay, I needed us to make that clear, the difference between guardianship, fostering, and adoption. So now let's go back to adoption, which is what we're talking about today. Who can adopt and who can be adopted, taking into
Oh,
consideration age, marital status, gender, financial capability, and all of that.
okay. Statutory adoption, as we're talking about, is a formal process and is governed by law. The law
Okay,
provides for the qualification of persons who are eligible to adopt and who can be adopted.
adopted.
Now, yes, under the Child's Right Law of 2022 in Rivers State, which is similar to the Child's Right Act, a couple, husband and wife, can
Mm,
adopt a child if they are up to 25 years. And if
okay.
they are not less than 21 years older. No, let me take that again, because this mathematics has to be correct. If not,
Okay.
the court will,
No,
even
take
if
your
you started
time.
the process, if you start the process and you don't get this part right, when you get to court, there will be no order. You can't
Okay.
manipulate this process, especially requirement. When something say so these are requirements of law, you must meet the requirements. If you want to adopt a child as a man and a woman, two people come together and say, okay, we want to be the parent of this child. You must be 21 years older than the child.
21
And then
years older than the child.
you must not be less than 25 years.
This is for couples.
Yes,
This
for
age
couples.
requirement is for couples. Okay.
Yes, two people. Now, if you are a single person and you say, okay, I want a child, in the situation of a male, you can only adopt a boy, and in the situation of a
Okay.
woman, a female, you can only adopt a girl. Though it will be very difficult for the courts, except exceptional circumstances. You need to prove for a man to be able to adopt a boy. I'm not saying this because it sounds discriminatory, because somebody might even put up a question of, why are you saying that? But it's the truth. The court is going to be wary of a man coming to seek for
Adopting a girl.
adoption of a boy. No, of a boy. Because
A man
the
adopting a
the, the,
boy.
the a man adopting a boy, I'm
Okay.
saying something that is clear. Yes, the court
Okay, I
is
thought you meant that as a man you can only adopt a male child, and as a
I have
woman you can only
stated that
adopt a
you
female
can only
child.
adopt the same sex as you are, but the
Okay.
court is careful. I didn't say a man cannot adopt,
Okay,
a
okay,
single man
okay.
cannot adopt, but the court is careful when a single man
Okay.
walks into court and says, I want to adopt a boy, because we all know that nurturing is a woman's ability. And a man who wants a child can have, he has the seed that he can get a progeny from. So circumstances must show probably some kind of issue of infertility. There are different circumstances that would require a single man to say, okay, I cannot get married, or I don't want to get married for my wife to have our biological children. I don't want to also foster a child. I want my own child without a woman. I don't know if you understand the circumstances. Without a woman. And I want to have a male because I can only adopt a male. The court will look into those circumstances. But when a woman comes to court, I am not married. Are you understanding me? Yes. It sounds discriminatory, but it is the society we live in. I am not married. I have not been married. And I am up to 35 years. For a single person, the age requirement is 35 years. You must be up to 35 years before you are able to adopt a child in Rivers State. So the court says, okay, madam, why are you here? I'm 35 years and above. Let's assume I'm 40. I want to have a child. I want to adopt this child. It's easier for the court to read through the circumstances and situation and say, okay, this person is eligible to get the child. That's the situation we are in. But the male can also, the men or the male can also prove their own situation in court. It is the duty of the court.
Viewers are following.
Person, if you're applying as a man, 5 years before you can even think of adoption.
That to be clear.
And you must be 21 years younger than the child. You cannot be 25 years and you want to adopt 21
years older than the child. 21 years older than the child.
You cannot be 25 years and you want to adopt a 10-year-old. You say, oh, after all, the law says 25 years. I'm more than 25. I'm 30. And then you want to adopt a 10-year-old. 30 minus 10 is 20. You are not 21 years.
So there must be no mistake. You must be 21.
You must be 21 years older. You must be 21 years more mature than that child that you want to adopt. And then after that, if you're applying as a married couple, like I said, you must be 25 years. And if you are applying as a married person, but a single married person, you're married, but you want to adopt the child as a woman, you must seek your husband's consent. You're married, you want to adopt a child as a man, because it's not in all situations that the adoption comes from the couple. It could be, I'm married to my husband and he has 3 wives. The other wives have children. I don't know if you understand me. I have no child. I want to adopt. I'm just painting a scenario. It could be a single couple, but I want to have my own child. And my husband says, no, God's time is best. I say, no. I go to court. Please give me an adoption order. See the child I want to adopt. The court requires the consent of your husband.
Of your spouse.
So if your husband withholds that consent, it may be a problem under the law. There are provisions of the law that deal with that. Also, you can prove that the consent is withheld unjustly if you can prove all that. But that particular requirement is there. The consent of the consent of the spouse, whether husband or wife. So the applicant ought to be of the same sex as the child if he's a single applicant. So that's really the requirement. Yes, the other ones are yes, those are the basic requirements of law. The other ones are your medical certificates of fitness, police clearance certificates against crime, and obviously your birth certificates, your marriage certificates, your passports in exceptional cases, or necessarily, yes, your passport if you have one, and means of identification, and most times even statements of accounts that you can actually care for this child.
Take care of that child.
That you are not adopting this child to go and do to sell children, yes, or to go for slave. No, you're not trying to traffic somebody. You actually want this child to bear your name. Yes, you must have substantial. It must not be millions, but you must prove that you can survive.
Take care of the child.
Yes, you and the child can eat daily bread. And also, what else?
Must the applicant be a Nigerian?
Thank you very much for drawing our attention to that. you can only adopt a child in Nigeria who is a Nigerian if you are a Nigerian. Please, I am married to Mr. James, who is a Canadian. And me and my husband want to adopt a Nigerian before we relocate to Canada. It's not possible.
Not possible.
You would have to be the applicant. Only you. Only a Nigerian can adopt a Nigerian child.
So if you are applying as if you are a sole applicant in that case, that means you have to be 35 years.
Yes.
The rule of 35 years will apply to you.
Will now catch up with you, yes.
Okay.
So if you are not 35 yet, you can't be an applicant if you're applying solely for yourself. So if you have a spouse, who is not Nigerian, it means you have to be the sole applicant. Therefore, you must be above 35. And then the Nigerian thing, there are some people who have dual citizenship, US and Nigeria. Yes, those persons can apply because you're Nigerian and then you have, yes. So some people are based in the US, they lived all their life in the US, but they're Nigerians because the Constitution says your parents or your grandparents, yes, you know the procedure for everybody has access to the Constitution. Many people don't know, but please, Nigerians should take time to read the Constitution. You can download it, it's there. What qualifies you as a Nigerian? I'm saying it because many people don't even know what qualifies them as a Nigerian. Some people come from Togo and they school in Nigeria. Before you know, they think they are Nigerians. It is when the laws now start to apply earnestly, yes, that you find out that you are not entitled to many things.
A lot of things, yes.
Some people who have lived all their lives in Nigeria, but they are Cameroonians, and then they feel that everything that applies to me applies to them. No, it doesn't. It is when when push comes to shove, that is when we know who the real Nigerians are. For things like this, if you're not a Nigerian, you cannot adopt a Nigerian child. So that's basically the requirements of law. Aside from other documents that the social welfare office will ask for, of course, you fill the forms there, pay some certain regulatory fees, and they would conduct inspection. They would see the child. They would know of the circumstances, where you got the child from, and everything surrounding that child. They will be aware. And then they would also visit you. And then when they are satisfied, they may not visit you, but they would know about the circumstances of the child. And the only way they can see the child is to visit. So if the child is in the orphanage, they need to see the child. If the child is in your house, they need to see the child. And then there's this provision of you must have resided with the child in Nigeria, or rather in the states, in Rivers State here, for a certain period. So
it's important to let our viewers know that this river state we are talking about, the law is similar in every other state.
Yes, it's also in the Child Rights Act. Yes, it's also in the Child Rights. It applies all over. You must have resided in that state with the child. So you can't just jump in from Lagos to Port Harcourt. And maybe you started adoption in Lagos. They know you there as a criminal, or you've done something in Lagos, and then you come to Port Harcourt, and in 2 weeks, your aim is to take an adopted child out from River State. No. You have to be residing in River State.
For 3 months at least.
For at least 3 months. You must be residing in River State to be able to adopt a child from River State. Adoption is not done by proxy. Oh, I'm in UK. I need a child. My mother should adopt a child for me. You know these scenarios that really happen around. People try to manipulate the system. There's no adoption by proxy. That woman or man wants to adopt a child has to come down to Nigeria and adopt the child and then go back. And the process can run its term because there's a 12-month period before the court can actually grant the final order. But the court must see you. Truth be told, if I am even a judge, it would be hard for me to hit that gravel and I did not see the person adopting the child. It's very
because
risky.
Everything has to be in the best interest of the child.
If there's an appeal against that thing, the court, no. Some people say, it's not adoption, just carry the child now, lawyer, do this one, file it. Every day my auntie will bring the child over with passports. You don't want to take one step into the country or into the state, but you want to adopt a Nigerian child. It's wrong. It's wrong. I
Before
don't
you
know how
know it,
people try to
you might
manipulate
even
this
be
system.
it might even be considered child trafficking, and
I'm
you're in
telling you,
trouble.
people, if you are really in need of, because most times people in diaspora find it difficult adopting children outside, especially with their Nigerian passports. So it's
Okay.
easier for them to adopt children back home and then take those children overseas. But you have to come home. You have to come back to the States to adopt the child legally. And then you go back.
Okay.
And then allow the
Okay.
process to run its course while the child is with a relative, your mom, your sister, your friend, or even your husband. But you must be seen by the courts. With
By the
the court
court.
is not the court is not voodoo. The court is a human being. The court wants to see who is this person that I am going to sign off as the as the parent of so and so person. Because once adoption is
Okay.
complete, a new birth certificate is given.
With the applicant's name as the new parent.
Yes, the National Population Commission is informed by the Social
Okay.
Welfare Office that this person is now legal parent of so and so person, assuming it's an infant. So you take the information with the court order and everything, and then you go and you get a new birth certificate for that child. Just imagine a situation where nobody has seen the birth mother, and then nobody is also seeing the adoptive mother.
They
Very
just want
scary
to sign
situation.
the child off to a
we
stranger.
don't we don't know the birth mother has left the picture. The adoptive mother is also not wanting to show her face or his face in the picture. It creates very awkward scenarios and situations. So adoption,
Okay.
like I said, is it may seem simple, but it's a complex process. The court has to be very
Okay.
sure. It's a mistake that courts do not want
Do
to
not
make.
want to make. Okay,
They
so
don't want to make that mistake.
let's talk realities now. How much does it really cost approximately? How long does it take? How simple, how
See,
difficult is the
I'm
process?
smiling.
And so
You're asking a lawyer how
someone that
much it
wants to
costs.
adopt no, you know what to do, you know what to say, because people feel that like I said, what's the procedure on paper? So let's talk realities. How difficult is it? What's the length of time in reality? Someone who wants to adopt, how do they prepare themselves? What should they put into consideration before they even begin the process?
Mm. Truthfully, I can't sit here and tell you it will cost you this, because most times some people are more enlightened than others. Sometimes people already have documents to go through the adoption process. They are aware of these documents. Sometimes people
Okay.
just come to you with only the definition of adoption. They don't even have the child. They want
Mm-hmm.
barrister to go and look for a child for them. Sometimes people have the child and they've even been to the social welfare office, but now it's time to go to courts, and you can't do that without a lawyer. I don't know if you're understanding me. So at
Yes.
every stage, when you meet a legal practitioner, that is where they begin to count or to assess the work. Because legal practice, we assess based on quantum, is work done. I charge you for the work that I would do for you. So if you have taken care of some of the issues and I'm to handle these issues, I would say, okay, this is what it costs. But let me not even speak as a lawyer. Let me just speak as a social advocate. There are some institutions these days that take care of this whole issue. I believe they are using it as a form of business, but they take care of the social welfare, the
Application.
organizations, um, and poor adoption institution. But their ends and their departments, maybe medical departments, that actually handle most of these things. So if you are looking for them, they're out there. It is, they say, if you are looking for
Okay.
something, that is where you would know that it can be found. If you're not looking for a child to adopt, you may not even know that these things exist. But they are there. They handle all of these processes. But if you want to go through the process yourself, at what point do you meet your lawyer to say, okay, please, I want to do this? That is where the charging begins to
Begins.
run. Yes, so
In
some lawyers even come into the process when the matter is already in court and it's taken over by another lawyer. So the fees would
okay.
always differ. But adoption is an expensive process. I'm not saying it's 10 billion or 5 million or 1 million or 2 million. Just the same thing as IVF. When you go for IVF, they tell you, okay, 1 million, 1.2. But they will not tell you that the first one may not work. I don't know if you understand. And
That
then you
might
find out
fail.
that you find out that you may have to do it 3 times, 2 times, 4 times, try to convince your husband. You may end up doing some sperm donation, egg donation. The complications are all there. What is important is that, okay, I want to try this process and I can afford it. Because
So in
even
other words,
natural birth is expensive, except those that give birth at home. Even the ones that give birth at home, you will still buy toilet roll, cotton wool, and things to clean the baby. These things are all expensive. So I don't know why people feel that adoption should be cheap.
so
If it is,
even when you have the money, you have to be mentally prepared, because there might
it,
be
it,
some
it, it,
hiccups
it is
along
not
the
all
road.
about the money. Adoption, you're not buying the baby. Adoption is just the process to get the child legally.
Okay,
Is your
someone
child.
dropped a question. Let's can we quickly answer that? Someone said, Edum said, please, what happens when someone comes into Nigeria from abroad for sighting and the court sees the applicants before he or she returns abroad, before the end of the 12-month approval period? It's a long comment.
even even
Uh,
even that 12 months period
no,
is
said the
not.
judge, sorry, said the judge is moved. She said before the end of the 12-month period, the judge is moved to another jurisdiction, dies, or is elevated. Sorry, my screen. The text is on the part of the screen that is bright and is white, so I'm straining my eyes to see what he typed.
I
If
understand,
can you
and
see
let
the
me just
comment?
assume. Yes, I can see
Okay,
it. It's asking a legal question. What happens
okay,
when you start? Adoption is a civil process. What happens when you start a civil process and the court is transferred, or the judge dies, or something happens and the matter has to start all over? And the truth is, I understand that question. The truth is, like all civil matters, but there's a peculiarity to adoption, because under sections 150 to 154, the law of Rivers State says, okay, the family courts, which could be the magistrate court or the high court, family court handles adoption in Rivers State. Now, the court is a system, is not a judge. In the case of
okay,
adoption, yes, adoption is a process that comes in from the state ministry into the court, and there is a file. And with each stage, there are documents that are inside this file. I'm trying to break it down to the layman's language. There are
okay,
documents that are inside this file. So even if anything happens to a judge or the court that is handling this matter, even if a court wants to make some decisions or has some sentiments, it is the court's duty to put it in writing and put it in the file, the court's file.
okay,
Because these files can actually, cases are transferred from one court to another without the judge even having to have any sickness or anything. A case can be transferred. A judge can be
okay.
elevated. So it does not terminate the
The
case.
process.
Especially
Okay,
in cases, yes, it doesn't terminate the process, especially in cases like adoption, which is
okay,
a matter that is regulated by time. So if the judge that was in the matter before has gone through all the procedures that he or her, male or female, should go through, and has gotten to a stage where, okay, something happens to that judge and that judge is no longer available, the next person that takes up that file continues, because you don't
okay,
expect the assuming the person coming for the adoption is in Canada or US, UK, Germany, has gone through the process with the Ministry of Social Welfare and Rehabilitation, has come to court, has filed, and has transferred all legal representation to the council, and
okay,
then has gone back, yes, waiting for all the orders and all that, because they also have a life abroad and jobs. And then something happens and the council calls and say, this our judge is no more. Oh, see the case file. All it will take is some administrative procedure. It does not terminate the case. It shouldn't. In
okay.
all honesty, it shouldn't.
I hope that answers your question, Edun. Okay, so let's move forward.
Yeah,
I believe we've
you asked me what should a person think of before adopting
yeah
a child.
before beginning the process.
Okay, like we have talked about, you must think about the age requirements. You must think about
Okay.
whether you are eligible. Yes, you must visit orphanage. You must have the child, so you visit orphanages or avoid fraud. Though, avoid stolen babies, because those ones come with
We
their own
have a lot of
complications.
them. We have a lot of
Yes.
them everywhere.
So if the parents
Baby
are not in
factories.
Nigeria,
Baby factories.
if the parents are not in Nigeria, they need to travel down to Nigeria to participate in the process.
Okay.
If the applicant needs to have the child in their care and custody for a few months, they need to take care of that. And then financial capacity, you must be able to prove that. And then you must be medically fit. Yes. And then the
Okay.
guardian or the biological parents consent. Most people forget this. The consent of the biological parents is needed. Except, the law says, except the biological parents cannot be found, or the consent cannot be given, or is not able to be given. In such circumstances, the court may, based on what it has seen, may waive that. But the biological consent must be sought from somebody
That
that
means
is
that when it comes to
related.
adoption, there's something like fraud
Uh,
in adoption.
See how I said it? I said it like a
So
Nigerian. Hey. Of course,
so let's talk about fraud in
of
adoption.
course,
Fraud and duress. Fraud and duress.
of course.
So we can have situations where people biological parents who had given their consent can come out to say that they gave their consent under duress, or that it was fraud. They did not mean to give their consent, or they want to reverse the adoption order. It's
I was going to
possible.
discuss this. Yes, I was going to discuss this when I was going to maybe mention reversal of adoption. Adoption is a final process. Is a final process. Finality is so strict that the court does not look back the moment an adoption order is given. But there are
Okay.
circumstances when the court has to open that book that it has closed. Because once the court gives an adoption order, documentations begin. The child is put in the adoption register. The National Population Commission it documents the adoption, and a birth certificate is issued. That name begins to go around as adopted. So for a court to reverse that order, it means there are so many places that it has to go back to remove what it has already done. But there are
Okay.
situations, exceptions, where it is discovered that fraud, duress, undue influence was exerted. Oh, let me not use big language. Fraud, duress, or undue influence was used.
There was fraud. There
Yes,
was
yes,
fraud.
thank you. You know, lawyers, we have to. Let me not use big language. Fraud was seen. Fraud can be
Mhm.
proved that it took
Okay.
place in the process. Yes, maybe the child was bought, or the mother was forced to give up her child, or the adoptive parents were alive, but it was claimed that they are dead. You know,
The
many
biological parents,
situations.
rather.
Yes, the
Mm,
biological
mm,
parents are alive, or maybe
mm.
the father is late, and then they want to do away with the mother, and then they say she's dead. Oh, adopt this baby. Meanwhile, the biological mother is alive, probably even in hospital. Maybe bedridden, she's in coma. You know, many situations can arise for people to do very mischievous things. So circumstances can arise when the court can say, okay, I need to go back on what I did. The court is
Okay.
allowed. Even the Supreme
And
Court.
who can apply for this reversal
Different
apart from the
people can.
biological parents?
Even the adoptive parents. That's why I
Okay.
said it's a very complex situation.
In case they uncover a lie that they were not
There's
aware
there's
of.
a term there's a term in law: disruption of adoption and reversal of adoption.
Okay.
Disruption of adoption comes in when the adoption process has started, but it has not been completed, and then there is a termination. So
Okay.
the termination could arise at the instance of the adoptive parents. It could also arise at the instance of the biological parents or relatives of that child. It could even arise at the
Okay.
instance of the social welfare office. If
Okay.
from there, it's because they will continue to conduct investigation and inspection. If from their investigation they see something that should not be, they would raise alarm, and there will be a disruption of the process. That's what they call disruption of adoption. So disruption
Okay.
occurs while the process is still
It's
in
still
court.
on. Okay.
Then reversal means that the court has actually granted the order of adoption, but now
Okay.
there's an application before the court that that order should be reversed. That's the reversal of adoption.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So
Thank you so
disruption
much.
can occur when most times disruption occurs when the adoptive parents realize that they don't want to adopt this particular child anymore, based on
Anymore.
something, maybe medical conditions. Sometimes this life, a lot of things happen. People realize that, okay, this child wants to adopt. It has been during the process of the medical checks. This child has some physical. Okay, physically it may be okay. This child has some mental issues. This child is not. This child is not cognitive enough, or this child just has some challenges, physical and biological challenges, and they say, okay, we can't go ahead with this process, because for me to adopt a child, I must love the child and be
And
willing
be
to become a
happy.
parent. Yes. The court will not force you to take a child because you have started the process. So you
And
need to
this is
show
very
that, okay,
important, being that this child is not your biological child. So the child has
you
to be
must.
fit so that you can love them. Because it's not your
You
blood.
can
I
even.
mean, let's be
Some people
realistic. It's
even
not
adopt.
easy.
No, some people adopt children that are physically challenged. It's not about having some problems. It is about you. That's why I say you must be mentally ready.
Ready.
Some people adopt children who are in wheelchair. They're on wheelchair. You adopt a child. It's the love that you say, okay, the love
Yeah.
I can have for a child of my womb, my progeny, I can actually give it to this
To this
stranger.
child.
So the
Okay.
physical condition of the child does not matter, but the disruption or reversal can arise at the instance of different people, birth parents, adoptive parents, and even the adopted child or adoptee at that time can file a petition.
Through their guardian, right?
Yes, and the guardian of the child at the time during the period of the adoption is the welfare officer. The court
Okay.
appoints the guardian ad litem, yes, and says, okay, you will be the guardian of this child till the
This
adoption
process
process
is
is
over.
over. So that child can say, okay, that's for disruption. But if it is for reversal, obviously the adoptive parents are the guardians and parents of the child. So the child has to seek the counsel of other persons to say, okay, how do I go about reversing this adoption order? The child will need to prove. If the birth parents wish to regain their parental rights, they will petition the court for an adoption to be reversed. It's difficult, too. In fact, it's almost impossible. But there are circumstances
It
that the
can be
court will
done.
look at, which are extraordinary circumstances that the court cannot say no. If not, it will obvious what the court looks at. Primarily, section 1 of the child right law always says the best interest of the child. So in any situation that is brought before a family court on an
They will
adoption
consider
issue,
the
what the
interest
court
of the
yes,
child.
the best interest of the child is what the court looks at. So even if the adoptee says, I don't want this family anymore, look at what they do. Look at how they perform. Every family has their. I want to say something, but I know that example I'm about to give now will sound very
Yeah, but
okay.
we know that things are happening.
People, people do a lot of things. Yes, people do a lot of things in their homes within the confines of their privacy. So the adoptive child may say, I don't want this family for this and this reason. So the child also, apart from the birth parents and adoptive parents and relatives, the child is entitled to seek for a reversal. It
Okay.
rarely happens, though. Yes, I've not seen a situation where it happens, but it's possible. All you need to
Okay.
do is prove. Everything is possible before a court of law. You just have to prove and convince the court that it is in the best interest of the child. So that's what
Okay.
happens with adoption. And then, of course, if it can be proved that fraud and duress, where the consent was obtained by fraud, that consent of the biological parents was obtained by fraud for the court to grant that order, and then there was duress, obviously the court would, anything that is founded on fraud amounts to nothing. It will
Of course.
crash. So that one,
Okay.
that one is established, there's no two ways about it. The court has to reverse the adoption order. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to round up soon, but let me just say this. To the viewers, please, Jessica is an expert when it comes to adoption. So feel free to go to her DM if you want to make consultations, or you want to adopt a child, or you have questions, but you will pay. You will pay for her services. But I can assure you that you will get results. And we're supposed to have Marianodu Esquire with us, but for some reason, I've not been able to add her. I've not been able to get her request too. So I'm very sorry about that, Marian. Okay, let's round up. Let's talk about inheritance.
I knew you were going to talk about inheritance.
It's very important. Since we are
Is
saying that
true?
once the child is legally adopted, the child is entitled to the adoptive parents' properties and all of that. What about traditional stools and properties and assets of grandparents? Are they entitled to that as well?
After adoption, an adopted son or daughter loses all the let I want our viewers to understand me. An adopted son or daughter loses all the rights of a son or daughter in their biological family, including the right to claim any share in the estate of a biological family. I don't know if we understand what estate is, but in the properties of a biological father. That being said, you are now entitled to get a share in your adoptive parents' estates and ancestral properties. Now, I'm saying it slowly because I'm heading somewhere. Now, your adoptive father becomes your adoption order creates a new lineage. It creates a new lineage and it says, okay, this person now has your blood. So the court is like a god to say, okay, this person was not born of your blood, but this person is now born of your blood under law. So all the rights and privileges of a child, now attach to the to the adopted child. Flowing from that, it means that an adopted child can inherit from the father, the mother, which are adoptive parents, and the grandparents. Whatever a father or mother is entitled to, the adopted child is also entitled to it. Now, adopted children would have equal share. In all cases where equal share is given, the adopted child is entitled to the same share as biological children. There can be no discrimination as by virtue of being adopted when it concerns inheritance. As long as you adopted legally, not customary adoption. No, I will talk about that one before I log off. I did not say you pick the child and you pay the school fees and then the child says I'm part of this family. No, adoption that was statutorily done, that child is a member of that family and is entitled to all the rights and privileges of a biological child. When we talk of traditional titles and stools, I'm an Igbo woman. I'm also an Opobo woman. When we talk of traditional titles and stools, the truth is, customary law and adoption has not really blended in Nigeria. And customary law varies depending on ethnicity. In Nigeria, we are yet to have a union of our customary system because different cultures apply different rules. There is no one particular rule to culture. But if an adoptive father is entitled to a stool or a property that can be passed down to biological children, that stool is entitled to be passed down to the adopted child. I don't know if you understand me. But customary law would seem to tell you. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay. Customary law would seem to tell you that there are certain customs that only a child of the same blood, I don't know if you're getting, the same blood can inherit, such as kingship, certain ancestral stools, or certain ancestral properties that if you are not of the same blood as that man or that woman, you cannot sit on that chair You cannot use that stool. You cannot hold that staff and all that. In such situations, the adopted child is, how does the law say this? The adopted child is, what's the word now? I'm trying to look for a better word for injustice, because the adopted child in this case now is harmed, because adoption is a circumstance of birth. So the Constitution says we should not discriminate based on circumstances of birth. Now, circumstances of birth meaning that this child is adopted, and this man has said that, okay, this is now my child. But because he is not of the same blood with this child, and the man is no more, or even if the man is still alive, they are saying that this person cannot be the crown prince, or this person cannot inherit this stool, or this person cannot inherit. Customarily, an adopted child can inherit property. There's no, once it gets to court, the court will even take that matter first, because it will be easy for the court to dismiss the matter. But when it concerns traditional titles that are not tested in courts, these ones are determined by our traditional institutions, council of elders and chiefs. They seem to have a strong view about blood lineage. So the adopted child in this instance is considered a child, but is often set aside as not being qualified enough to inherit ancestral stools. I don't know of the customs that have improved to the level of accepting it, but I am yet to see a court judgment that has
allows an adopted child.
Yes, that has solidified this matter. Yes, it has not. It is. I would say it is yet to be tested in court, because I cannot be sure that I have gone through all the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal judgments from the beginning of time. But I can say that in recent years, the law reports are yet to show that an ancestral stool has been denied an adopted child, and the court has given judgment in favor of the adopted child. We are yet to test that in court, because the person to test that in court is the adopted child. So, but most times the adopted children that are faced with this situation seem to want to let go of it, because by circumstances of birth, they always feel second class, which should not be. You are the child, in fact, the first child of a family, if it is an adopted child, remains the first child of that home. A biological child cannot claim to be the first child when there is an adopted first child. I don't know if you get me. Some people adopt children, and the moment they have biological children, this one becomes like a help. And then the biological
God has blessed them with the fruit of their own womb.
God has blessed me with my first son. You begin to refer to your biological child as your first daughter or your first child or your first son. Meanwhile, you have a first daughter or a first son that you have adopted. You know, people are the problems in Nigeria. It's not the law, and it's not the lawyers. The lawyer has done his work, the judge has done the work, and then they give you the child, and before you know it, some people come back to the lawyers to say, I beg, how I go fit to return this child? God has blessed me with my own children. This child is just causing problem. Before you know it, husband and wife begin to argue, especially when maybe the consent was given by the other spouse just to fulfill all righteousness. I told you to have patience, we'll have our own child. You said no, you wanted to adopt. Now God has given us a child. What do we do with this adopted child? You know, I begin to refer to the adopted child as it. And this thing affects the mindset. A lot of people are adopted. A lot of men and women in society today doing very well, functioning in different parastatals and organizations and parts of society are actually adopted people. But it's a circumstance of birth. The same way you are born by a single mother who is not married, or you are born to parents who later get divorced. Adoption is just one of those circumstances. Nobody decides which family they will come into. And I'm very sure an adopted child did not beg to be adopted. I don't know if you understand. Especially if the child is an infant. You were the one who went and adopted the child. So why create emotional, physical, mental, and psychological trauma for somebody who did not beg you for something? The child was probably somewhere on the street or in the orphanage or in the hospital. You saw and loved and liked, or probably you wanted to use to your own advantage to satisfy or pacify in-laws or something. You know, people take care, like I mentioned earlier, people engage in adoption for different reasons. But when it concerns ancestral stools, if that matter is tested in court I would be of the opinion that the adopted child would win. Because first of all, the customary law, we all know that is repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience cannot stand. That's a primary rule. Once it is repugnant to natural justice, my parents adopted me, so I am entitled to anything that a biological child is entitled to. Ordinary, that already breaks the natural justice rule. So that's really what I can say. But do we need adopted children to test it in court? I cannot test it for them. Neither would the chiefs that are punishing these adopted children. Obviously, when it's time for inheritance of these tools, these children have already grown into men and women in society. So most of the time they just let go, because God has already given them some quality life, and dragging things with villagers,
no need to
yes,
drag.
there's no need to drag, even if it's their right. They just feel that they need to let go. So, but if you want to stand for your rights, let's test it in court.
Yeah, we look forward to legislation that solidifies this aspect of adoption, inheritance of traditionals to one day. It will be groundbreaking and very interesting. I think you've done justice to everything, Jessica. We've talked about
Yes.
infertility as a factor that leads to adoption. We've talked about the procedure for adoption, who can adopt and who can be adopted. You've been able to differentiate between adoption, fostering, and guardianship. We've also talked about the realities of adoption as it is in Nigeria. And then we've just spoken about inheritance rights of adopted children. And I don't think we have any questions. I've seen Marian's comments. Thank you.
I also have one thing to say, because last year I had a client who was worried. Adoptive parents often get confronted by biological parents. Most times, if you adopt a child and the child is from an orphanage, it's easy. The adoptive parents are severed. But when you adopt a child that the biological parents are known, and they say, okay, we don't want. We have 11 children here. We can't survive with them. You don't have a child. Take this, our 12th one. We give you. You know, the situation like that happens. Take this,
and then you follow through with the legal process.
You follow through with the legal process, and then you adopt the child, and you are in your mansion somewhere, and every morning somebody is knocking at your gate. I want to see my child. Oh, the next day, I want to see my child. The next month, Christmas, I brought Christmas rice for my child. You know, frustrating.
Jessica, are you there?
Hello?
Are you there? Okay,
yes, I'm here.
You're back.
I can hear you. Everything is handled with wisdom. Once an adoption order is given, the biological parents' rights are severed. Now, my client was actually worried that this is her child now, her only child, a girl, and I wasn't the one that did the adoption for her. And this girl is about 13. That was last year. She met me, and she said, because I advocate for estate planning, writing your wills, leaving trusts for your children, and the probate process. I advised her, prepare your will. She says if she writes a will and gives this property to her adopted child, what if something happens to her? This biological mother would come and just take over everything that she has worked for. I don't know if you get her worry. So that's her worry, that the biological mother would take over her assets. So first things first, I just had to inform her. I don't have to say all that happened. But what I want our viewers to know is a biological parent cannot inherit from an adopted child.
A biological parent cannot. Yes, I can hear you.
A biological parent cannot. I did not say may not. I said cannot inherit from an adopted child.
From their biological child who has now been adopted.
Yes. So once your child has been adopted, when it concerns inheritance, forget it. Even if the child dies without a will, Some people say the child should write a will. No, even if that child dies without a will, let's assume the mother of the child is no more, and everything the mother or parents have falls into the child's estate, and something happens to that child, nothing of that property, in fact, the biological parents are no longer known. So how in God's name would the properties fall into the hands of the biological parents? There's no way they want to do it. It's not going to be possible.
Okay.
Rather, that property, rather than going to the estates or rather than going to the biological parents, if anything happens to a child, the rules of intestacy will apply if the child does not have a will. Yes. And the rules of intestacy would look at the primary persons to inherit. Where there is no will, the law states that, okay, the spouse, if there is no spouse, the children. If there is no child, the parents. If there are no parents, brothers and sisters. If there are no brothers and sisters, relatives. If there are no relatives, relatives of the adopted parents, not biological. Nobody is even talking about biological parents anymore. So I told her, your fear, for them. Yes, your fear is just natural. But under law, your fear has no basis. Those people can do no harm to you, to your property. They cannot even perceive it. How much more to touch it? If anything happens to your child, your properties will start first with your spouse. If your spouse is not available, first it goes to your parents. If your parents are not available, that's the grandparents of the child. If those ones are not available, your brothers and sisters, that is how the ladder keeps going down. The court keeps looking for the nearest to inherit. If there is no nearest to inherit, then the state now comes in. That property falls into the intestacy that people say, okay, the state will inherit my property. When the state sees nowhere else for the property to go, the state will not go to call, okay, biological parents, we can't find anybody to inherit. So, okay, come into the picture. It can never happen.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make that clear, because that is a worry.
That was important.
That most people,
that was important.
Yes, most people go through that worry. Oh, I adopted this child, though. If I even give anything to this child, it may end up with the biological parents. It's not possible. The only way, let me state this, the only way a property of an adoptive parent can end up with the biological parents is if that adopted child gives that property in a will. Says, I give my land at number 5 Simfubara Close, Port Harcourt, to Mrs. Peace, and Mrs. Peace is the biological mother. That is that's why the will is very important. The adoptive child can do whatever they want to do with that will. So if you're worried, that is where your worry should even be, that your child would gift it in a will. Not that by rules of customary law, yes, or by chances of intestacy. Intestacy means the child is deceased without a will. By administrative rules of intestacy, the property will fall into the biological parents' hands. That is impossible under our laws. So that child now wants to give. Probably they had a relationship with their biological parents. There are some adoptive children that have relationships with their biological parents, and the adoptive parents actually encourage and accept it because they want to live in harmony. In such instance, they say, okay, rather than push these people away, let's just accept them. So the child knows, okay, this is mommy A, mommy B. This is daddy A, daddy B. These are biological parents. Probably for one reason or the other, they're not in the picture. These are my parents and these are my second parents. So in that instance, the child can gift to the parents. But for rules of customary law, the customary law that applies is the customary law of the adoptive parents. And that also becomes the customary law of the adopted child. If an adopted child was born into Edo State and is adopted by Yoruba people in Ogun State, the customary law applicable to the adopted child becomes Yoruba customary law under Ogun State. No more the principles of law that apply in Edo State. Automatically extinguished. So I just wanted to make that clear because it's also a worry in Nigeria.
Thank you. That was a very important one, please. Okay, Jessica, as we round up, let's take this last question from Greatness Bibiama. She asked, can an individual above 18 years of age be adopted?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
She said, can an individual above 18
Okay, I
years
can see
be
the question.
adopted?
Be adopted. Greatness, Amma. The individual is already an adult. Under sections 129, 274 of the Child Rights Law in Rivers State 2022, it's not possible. That child cannot,
Okay.
he need not be adopted through the process laid out under the law. The reason for adoption is for the protection, provision, maintenance, and guidance of a child. Because it is said that a child is in need of all these things. Once you become an adult, the Nigerian law assumes that you have the right to vote and be voted for. You have the right to marry. You have the right to a lot of things. You have the right to buy properties. You have the right to inheritance of land and all that and all that. You do not, under law, require state guidance or state provisions to take care of you. So it is assumed that there can be no adoption of an underage person. The same way you cannot adopt a child in a womb. In
An
Nigeria, there is no
underage
adoption of.
or overaged person? You said underage.
You cannot adopt an overage. Oh, thank you very much. Sorry about that. You cannot adopt an overaged person. Once a person is over 18, the Child's Right Act says that person is no longer a child. And the adoption process in Nigerian law is only meant for people who are under the age of 18. Truthfully, as a lawyer, the answer is simply no. An adoption order in Rivers State cannot be granted over somebody who is an adult. That is already an infringement of the rights of that person. Only minors can be adopted through that legal process. Adult adoption may be sought for different reasons. People want inheritance of intestacy. People want to restore original relationship. I know in Japan, they do some sort of adult adoption. I know I did a research once. I tried to see how Japan even manages to do that for rules of convenience, but it's never possible. If somebody wants to take the name of another person, the person is an adult and wants to now answer the name of another man and join that family, that's the right the adult has. It's a discussion between two adults. It's not for the court to interfere. It's not going to be possible under adoption process.
Okay. We have to round up because it's getting dark. I had to come downstairs because of my kids, and I don't want us to end up in darkness. But let's take this last question from Jennifer Abia. She said, please, what happens if something happens to the child? Maybe the child dies or runs away or something.
I don't understand the question. Within the adoption process, or if
after the child, I believe it's after the child has been adopted. Yes, maybe the child dies or runs away. You know, children can be funny. We were listening to the TB Joshua story about, what's that girl's name? One girl he adopted that kept misbehaving, and what if something happens? Maybe the child runs away. If the child dies, the child is dead. Once
a child is adopted, the child becomes your child. How you treat your children, you should treat that child. If the child runs away or the child dies, your child has died. Your child has run away. You do all the things that a mother or a father whose child has run away or whose child has died usually does. There is no specific rule, except the question is, would the law come for you or treat you in a special way, or are there punishments attached to it? Because I know some people feel they can get away with things when it concerns their biological children, but the law is on the side of the adoptive child, so you can't really do much. I don't know if that's the question, because if after a successful adoption something happens to the child dies, the child has been adopted. Once adoption is complete and the order has been made, that child belongs to you. If the child dies, your child has died. You bury your child. A reversal of adoption cannot take place because the child has died. If the child runs away, you adopted a child and the child no longer wants to be with you, the child decides to run away, your child has run away. You will not go to the social welfare office to report that your child has run away. You go and look for your child. You may complain to two people who know the child, or let's assume you didn't adopt an infant, you adopted a
Or you
toddler.
make a report
Toddler is
at the
also
police.
yes, you make a report to the police. Your child was sent to school and did not come back. Do you know if the child was kidnapped? Even if the child ran away, you look for the child in places where that child could have run to. There's nothing the court can do in that instance, because you should treat that child as you would treat your natural child. So that's really what I can say concerning that question.
I don't think we have any other question. Oh, Jessica, thank you so much. I know that you had to park by the road to join this session. I really appreciate. You've done justice to everything. Like I said before, Jessica is an expert when it comes to child adoption. She's also a property consultant. She's a public speaker. She's an author. She's a lot of things, but in this context, she's an expert when it comes to child adoption. So if
I'm
you want
not
to
a lot of
consult
things,
her,
so
a lot of good things. Sorry. So if you want to consult
I'm
her,
not a lot of things, please.
or you want to brief her, because you want to adopt a child, or you have someone who is interested, please feel free to go to her DM, send her a message, and she will respond. And I assure you that you're going to get results. You're going to get value for your money. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and we will see you in our next episode of Did You Know by the Human Project. Once again, thank you, Jessica. I'm grateful.
Thank you
So much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Okay, bye.
Bye.